back to Mondays with Mom, the podcast where my mom, Leah,
Hi.
and I, Jo, dive into her stories, experiences, and the lessons she's hoping I finally take to heart. My mom has always dreamed of turning her life into a book or a movie, and this podcast is our way of making that dream come true, one episode at a time. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Joey, and thanks for hosting again.
I don't know if you've noticed, but we sound a lot better.
We do sound a lot better.
We finally invested in a real setup.
A proper podcast setup. Now that we've got enough people that are liking us and enjoying our podcast, we decided we're going to go profesh.
Real profesh. But now that I have you here, how was Poland, by the way?
Okay, Poland was awesome. So beautiful. We went to Warsaw and Krakow and saw awesome things. I must admit, it's so beautifully decorated, so Christmassy, not as cold as what I was expecting it to be, which is good. I don't know if it's good for global warming, but it was good for me.
Okay.
And I really, really enjoyed it. Okay, parts of it were a little bit like almost a pilgrimage or paying our respects, because we did do the I don't know how to call it, the kind of difficult journey to Auschwitz, and saw that, which was really, really touching. But it was definitely something that's worthwhile seeing. And also, I would tell people definitely Warsaw and Krakow are awesome places to visit. Definitely worthwhile going.
Poland, if you want to sponsor us.
Yes. Anyone in Poland, like the Welcome to Poland tourist group,
Yeah, the tourist board. If you want to sponsor us, we're open.
we're definitely open to Polish sponsorship. So now that we've got that out of the way, I actually wanted to tell you, while I was there and we were walking around, we were actually in Krakow, and they took us to see one of the synagogues that hadn't been blown up.
Sure.
And so when we went in to see it, it was actually very, very pretty, and it had been turned into a bookshop.
Oh, cool.
So when I walked in and I was looking around at all the books and all the shelves, I was immediately drawn to one shelf that had red books.
Nice. I love the color red.
Me too, especially at Christmas time. But I was drawn to the shelf and went to have a look. And interestingly enough, all the books that were read there were either Bibles or Torahs.
Red is in READ or red is in
That's very
RED?
funny, Joe. That's very funny. You're on the ball. So
Thanks.
RED. And it reminded me of a story that I really wanted to tell.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So in the beginning, when I first got to university and I got in with a crowd of people, one of the girls that I got really close to was one of my best friends still. Her name is Lindy. Shout out to Lindy.
Shout out, yes.
And Lindy and I got really close. And one of the things that made us bond was our combined love and faith in God. Love for God and faith in God.
Mhm.
And Lindy was quite a mature Christian, very mature in her faith. In fact, when we finished our degree, she actually left South Africa and went to go work as a missionary in Mozambique for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Like really, really awesome. But in general, you could see from that, even though her and I both had amazing amount of faith, she was quite mature in her faith. So one of the things that Lindy kind of got me to do is to view God more as a father, as a parent figure, rather than this giant, looming, all-powerful being that everyone should be petrified of. And she also got me into thinking and got me into praying slightly differently. I remember when I was young, I used to sit down and say my prayers and say, okay, dear Lord, please help me, for example, pass the exam tomorrow, and please help all the children in Syria, and please help all the people. And I would kind of be very, very general with what I would be praying. And she would kind of explain to me that you need to rather be specific. You could ask God to please help Joe's dog be better behaved. You could ask God to help you with your ingrown toenail. And I remember thinking, ingrown toenail? Whoa, there's no way. I thought, God seriously has got no time for my ingrown toenail. And what was funny about that is that she kind of gave me the analogy that if you're a parent, and let's say you've got one child that's got a chronic illness, and you're kind of with this child all the time and helping this child all the time and always concerned about this child, and suddenly your other child trips and falls and grazes their knee. You're not kind of going to tell your other child that, oh, don't worry about your
Go
knee.
deal with it.
Yeah, go deal with your own problems.
Suck it up.
You wouldn't do that. You would go and help that child with the knee, because both children are equally important. Even though the one child's got a more serious problem than the other, both are equally important. And so that kind of
Nice.
helped shape my relationship with God and allowed me to have conversations with God, which I really appreciate. I'm not sure if God appreciates this. Lindy, you might be in trouble, but I really appreciate being able to do this. And one of the things that Lindy had is she had this Bible. Now, I remember by the time I got to university and I met Lindy, I had this little Bible, and my Bible was like this ancient English, old King James version that, I don't know, maybe the Queen speaks at Buckingham Palace, but
Maybe.
not the kind of language that I would use.
Yeah.
And if I ever wanted to look something up in the Bible, well, Lord help me. Literally, Lord help me. I would have to go like from one chapter to the next. And Lindy had this fancy Bible, and it was called the Life Application Study Bible.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And not only was it this awesome looking Bible, it was really, really thick. It looked really, really good. And what it had is it had all sorts of sections that helped you study the Bible.
Okay, cool.
And also had this excellent section where you could pick out a word or a phrase and look it up, and the Bible would tell you where to find this phrase a few times. So if, for example, it was a phrase that gets repeated fairly often in the Bible,
Yeah.
then you can find it. Or if you're thinking of a Bible verse for someone, and you're like me, because I mean, I always watch these Christians, especially reborn Christians, that seem to know their Bible a lot better than I do. And I kind of know the Bible verse, but by the time I realize it's Corinthians 13, chapter 1, I'm not as good at that, but I might remember parts of the Bible verse. And in this particular Bible, you could actually look up the parts you know, and it would guide you as to where in the Bible you could find it.
That's cool.
Very, very cool. And her Bible on the outside, which is what reminded me of the story, had a red cover.
Was it like a hard cover or like a soft cover?
It was actually a hard cover Bible,
Uh-huh.
and then it almost had, it actually had both. It had a hard cover, and then it had like a soft cover covering it.
That's a very fancy book.
It was very, very fancy and red.
And red. Nice.
And I always liked her Bible. So when I was married to your dad, Jo, I used to, every now and then, he'd say to me, well, what should I buy you for Christmas? And there were times where I kind of knew what I wanted, and I wanted jewelry, and I wanted this, and I wanted that. And then there were times where I was less sure what I wanted. And then I realized that, you know what I want? I want a Bible like Lindy's. And so him and I went looking. And every now and then he would be like in a really super good mood. And the thing with this Bible was, guys, that it was really expensive.
And probably really hard to find.
I don't know if it was that hard to find, but for me, it was hard to find.
Okay.
So every time I went looking for it in like a regular shop, and your dad was all excited at the time and said, you know what, if we find it, I'm going to buy it for you. And I'd get all excited. I would have possibly seen it in that same shop when I was on my own and didn't want to spend all that money because it was a lot of money. I'd wait till I go shopping with your dad and kind of like smile at him sweetly and bat an eyelid and say, should we go looking for the Bible? And if he ever said, let's go looking for it, we would walk into the shop and the Bible wouldn't be there.
Oh.
I remember once we walked into the shop and we found the Bible and it was there in black.
And you wanted specifically the red one?
Exactly. I actually turned down the black one. I had the opportunity to buy it and I turned it down.
Well, it wasn't the one you wanted exactly.
I mean, it was the exact same Bible. I think I was being a bit difficult. I'm not usually difficult.
Never. I've never ever say you're difficult.
It was that was a once-off difficult moment. So anyway, eventually my marriage ended. I never found the Bible and things.
We probably also forgot about the Bible at a certain point.
I think I kind of let it slide because there were other things that were keeping me occupied, more pressing matters like, will I have food tomorrow? And can I feed my children? And can I pay my domestic worker? And stuff like that, which, speaking of my domestic worker, Toko, shout out to Toko, who was unbelievably good to me, better than good. When I got divorced, I got to a point where I literally didn't know if I would have money to pay Toko's salary. And I went to Toko and I actually told her this. I don't know why I told her. I was a bit dumb at the time. But I actually was completely open and honest with her. And I said, Toko, I will always do my best, but I'm not sure if at the end of this month I'll be able to pay your salary. Now, Toko had her own children and she needed money for her children. And I was actually floored at the fact that she never walked out on me. And I do need to thank God.
Toko's amazing.
Toko's amazing. I need to thank
And
God.
a major blessing.
Absolutely. But he always, at the end of the month, helped me out that I had just enough to pay all my expenses. And it wasn't, God kind of throwing money down from heaven. It was putting people in my life, one of them being my sister Cleo and my brother-in-law George. Shout out to the two of you guys who were unbelievable. I mean, I don't even know how I would have survived without you. And then I had Aliki, who
different to Aliki, who was on the podcast.
Totally different to Aliki, who was on the podcast, who I also want to shout out to, someone who I got really close to in South Africa. And she would also just appear at my house with groceries. My parents. My mom was unbelievable. I mean, I don't think I went to the shops. I don't think I had time to go buy groceries. And I don't think I had a lot of money either. And she would appear once a week with these bag full of groceries that would last me for the next week. And between her and my sister and brother-in-law and Aliki and so many other people, I literally was so blessed. I actually had enough money every single month to pay Toko. But in the beginning, it wasn't easy. And when I was getting close to the end of the month and going through this quite horrible divorce, because my divorce was kind of ugly, I remember the one day being in a complete state and not concentrating. And as I was driving into our complex, I don't remember if I was looking at my phone or what I was doing. I actually drove into the main gate.
Sure.
And I actually somehow managed to derail this thing and to dent it.
That's hectic.
Very hectic. And so the body corporate, I kind of thought, oh, they're all insured and they'll sort it out for me. I don't know if they were insured, but they weren't prepared to sort this out for me. They actually told me that I am liable for this. And I thought, oh, Lord, one more expense. I just remember feeling so done in.
And overwhelmed, I'm sure.
Completely overwhelmed. And then I remember it was one of those times that, okay, since God is my parent, I actually reached out to God. And I don't even know if it was reaching out. I got really, really angry with my situation. I remember feeling quite angry with God. And I thought, God, are you even there? Do you even give a damn about me? Because can you not see that I'm kind of going through a really bad time? I'm getting divorced. I'm barely paying Toko's salary. I don't know what I'm doing with my children. I'm feeling a little bit anxious about my whole situation. And now you can't even move a gate out of the way, or I don't know, turn my steering wheel the other way or do something. I mean, I just felt completely, completely overwhelmed. And one other thing that happened is that while we were in this complex in Lone Hill, and I don't know, Jo, if you remember it or if you were too little to remember it. Not the complex. Do you remember the complex?
Oh, yeah, of course I do. Well, mostly. I remember the house. I don't remember, the general gated area, but I definitely remember that house.
Okay. Do you remember the jungle gym?
You mean the wash line?
I mean the wash line.
Of course I remember it. It was my favorite part of that whole property.
Remember you used to hang on the wash line and I'd swing you around?
Oh, that was so much fun.
We never ever had another wash line like that in any other house.
When we moved, that was the first thing I asked you about. I remember asking well, we have our jungle gym in the next house, and I think you were like, no, there's no space for one of those.
Yeah, no space, no money. Do you remember that you and Tina used to ride those tiny little black bikes going down that?
Those
plastic bikes that you kind of push
course.
off with your. And do you remember going down that downhill ramp that you could go down?
Of course I remember that.
I remember the one time where I got angry with her because I kept asking her to do this wearing shoes, and she went and did it barefoot.
She refused. Yeah, she refused. She did it barefoot. She
scraped all the skin off her feet.
Yes, she came back. Her foot was bleeding she went really fast down the hill.
And used her feet to brake.
And then when she came back.
And I was really cross when I saw these feet.
With her. But then she tried to tell you that no, it wasn't her fault. She didn't actually hurt herself. but some guy with blue skin and purple hair and what color eyes? I don't remember. Like
Orange
orange
eyes
eyes
came and poured blood all over her foot. Yes, Tina. That's a very believable story. Stick to that one, babes.
It actually was so memorable because after that, whenever something went wrong, we'd blame this blue skinned, purple haired guy for
Exactly.
for every one of our problems.
Exactly. But down at the bottom of that ramp, Jo, there was like a fence, and this fence was an electric fence that had about 12 wires. And I just thought, what a nice, secure complex. Isn't it lovely that they put up an electric fence for us? Till I realized that we were actually sharing that fence with a prison.
Wow. I had no idea actually. I think this is the first time I'm learning this right now.
Yes. Well, I'm glad. I'm
At the
glad.
tender age of 27.
I was not very happy when I found this out.
No, I can't believe you would
And
be happy.
exactly, I remember the one night, which was, again, at this time that I was going through one of the worst times of my life, and someone escaped from the prison.
What?
I remember you guys were asleep, especially you, Jo, for a change, you were asleep. I just to put in there, guys, that Jo slept through the night at 7. And I don't mean
The first time she's trying to say.
I don't mean 7 months. I mean 7 years. Yeah, but that's another story. That's a completely different podcast. So in the middle of the night with Jo and Tina sleeping for a change, I remember hearing the sirens from the prison, and suddenly I could hear this like thudding outside our window.
Oh, that's scary. Like a horror movie.
Like a horror movie, and I was so petrified, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't have an alarm system. So I did what any good South African would do that didn't have an alarm system. I dialed 101 777, and I thought that's the flying squad, and I'm still waiting for them to come.
That's the service delivery that we were all
Yes.
promised.
They actually never, ever appeared. I called it as an emergency, and nobody ever came. So I didn't even know what to do, and I was in such a state of panic that I did what they do in the movies. Hauled open my Bible, there I remember, on Psalm 23, and started, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," which is what people tend to do just as they're about to die.
Your little fancy, like, English can't speak properly Bible.
Yeah, exactly. My tiny black old King James version.
Yeah.
So the Lord maketh you down to lieth down in the, that's how it was. So that didn't help at all. Anyway, and maybe it did help because nobody broke in.
Okay.
But I remember just kind
Thank
of
goodness.
feeling so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And the following morning,
As they say these days, overstimulated.
both, without any money. And I remember going out into our garden the next day, and we had just outside our windows, we had flower beds. And in our flower beds, you could actually see these giant footprints from boots of the guy that actually had escaped from the prison, and he was literally outside our windows. That was a thud, but he never came in.
That's so scary.
And me, instead of being grateful that God helped me out and this guy didn't break in, I was my usual kind of bratty self with God. And I just said, "God, listen, why are you testing me like this all the time?" I said, if it's not bad enough that I'm getting divorced, I'm relying on everyone else for money, I barely know if I'm going to pay Toko at the end of the month, I'm kind of just making my rent, I now hit the gate, now these guys are escaping from a prison, I'm even living next to a prison, like, where are you? I kind of remember thinking, God, where the heck are you? And if you are somewhere around, would be really, really nice if you'd come down and just quickly kind of, I don't know, snap your fingers, do something, and sort out all these things for me.
At that point.
So a weird thing happened. A couple of days later, I got a phone call from a friend that I hadn't seen in a couple of years. So I met this friend when I used to live in an estate in South Africa, and I got quite close to her. But then as I was getting divorced and things were happening, I kind of turned into myself and we lost touch.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't actually spoken to her for a while, but I did have her number saved on my cell phone. And suddenly I see that she's calling me. And I get this phone call and she says, "Hi, Leah, how you doing?" And I thought, I'm okay, not that great. There's a lot happening in my life and I don't know if I'm well. And
things could be better.
Things could be better by quite a bit. And she said to me, listen, I'm sorry to bug you. You're going to think I'm insane. But she said, I kind of got a request from God. And I thought, okay.
You do sound insane.
Yeah, exactly. And she said, I got this message from God about a Bible for you. And I said, okay. And she said to me, God has asked me to get you a life application study Bible. And I thought, okay, you can. I've actually got goosebumps now that I'm telling you. And I thought, like, okay. And then I kind of said to her, I said, listen, I really, really appreciate this, because she told me she was working at a church bookshop.
Okay.
And I, in my mind, assumed that what she was doing is calling people and asking them, would they buy this Bible?
Yeah.
And I thought maybe I was just someone in her context that she thought she would.
Yeah, like a rational thing to think, I think.
And she said to me, no, you don't understand. Because I said, listen, it's just a bit too expensive for me. I've just hit the gate. I might need an alarm system. I can barely pay my domestic work. I'm not quite sure what's going on. She said, no, you actually don't understand. She said, God has given me explicit instructions that I'm not to take money from you for this Bible.
Wow.
I was like, whoa.
And you'd never told her about this Bible, I'm assuming.
I had never told. The only person that knew about that Bible was your dad.
Yeah, wow.
I had never ever breathed a word of it to anyone else. Anyway, she said, I'm going to be in your area in the next couple of hours. Do you mind if I come past and bring it for you?
Sure.
And I thought, oh, okay. I thought, oh, whoa, all right, okay. Okay, bring it for me. And she came a couple of hours later and walks in with this Bible. And guess what?
What?
The cover was red.
Wow.
So
Really?
this was this
The
Bible.
exact Bible that you wanted.
The exact Bible. And this is after I had been ranting at God and saying, listen, God, do you care about me? And at some point, I remember getting a bit too vindictive and nasty and kind of saying, is there even a God? And then it kind of like, kind of.
Yeah, like, oh my word, that you go back, God, I'm sorry.
I thought, yes, yeah, exactly. I thought, whoa, God, I'm sorry. And I thought to myself, it's actually quite amazing that he actually is there and he does listen and he definitely does care. It's just he doesn't kind of do things in my time.
I don't think in anyone's time. Like, I feel like there's lots of things I've talked to him about that the timeline doesn't fit with my timeline. Let me
I
just say.
remember with Jo what I used to do, and I Jo will tell you guys about this, and she used to get very annoyed. Is I remember reading this little poem once that said, if you ask God for courage, He will give you fearful situations. God will give you if you tell God, I want more patience, He will give you situations that test you in order for you to develop your patience. But I remember Jo telling me sometimes, so I'd kind of say to her, Jo, you need to learn to be more patient. And then she'd say, well, I'm not going to ask God. I'm not going to ask God.
I'm not asking God for it. I'm not going to ask God to make me patient because I know what's going to happen. I don't want more situations to be patient in. I just want the patience.
Yes. And then I remember people had told me, and one of them was my friend Lindy, who would tell me, also use an analogy of that when God is changing you as a human being, when He's changing your heart. She said to me, just like with gold, you can have like a gold bar. You melt down this gold bar first, and then you can mold it into beautiful jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself that,
stop melting me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm melted.
I'm melted
I'm
now.
beyond the melting point. I'm becoming steam.
Plus, people would kind of say to me that God only gives you what you can cope with. And I kept saying, God, you've misjudged me. You've misjudged me here. I stopped coping a while ago.
I stopped coping like 20 incidents ago.
But I do sometimes look back at that time and think to myself, how the heck did I actually manage that? I mean, obviously, I understand when I had these unbelievable people that God put in my path that helped me out. But how did I have strength to go through all of these things? And then I realized it wasn't me. It wasn't me on my own.
I know what you're going to say.
Yes.
It's going to be you were being carried.
I was being carried.
Like the footprint story.
Like the footprint story, which is that, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know that story, guys, I'm going to give you just a brief summary. My absolute favorite story that you always see on all these inspirational verses, where it says there was a guy who had a dream, a guy who really believed in God, and he had a dream. And in his dream, he dreamt that he was walking on a beach, and he dreamt that he was walking with God. And he noticed that he would look along his life, see his life from a distance, and he'd see two set of footprints, one belonging to him and one belonging to God. And then as he was looking at this a little bit with a bit more scrutiny, he noticed that when things were going really badly in his life, when things were tough, there would only be one set of footprints in the sand. And he kind of went to God and questioned him and said, God, you actually promised to be with me every step of the way, but yet whenever I have a difficult time, that's when you leave me. And God answered him, oh, my child, I really love you and I would never leave you. In those times that you only see one set of footprints in the sand, it was then that I carried you.
I really like that analogy.
And so I still have the Bible.
I remember you have that Bible because you'd have it sitting on your nightstand along with all your ikonas. And it's like the most bookmarked. And like you can tell that it's been opened and read very well because it's worn around the edges.
It is very worn
and
around
pages,
the edges.
like it doesn't look crisp and unused. Like you can tell that she's used this a lot and she's gotten it, which is I guess the point of why she got it in the first place.
And I think all I really need to do is even just look at it and then it just reminds me.
Yeah. And it also reminds you too, like there's not just grateful to God, but grateful for the people in your life that God put in your life to help you and look after you.
Absolutely. Like these people that I, almost could say at the time were angels in my life, that I wouldn't have made it without them.
Exactly.
So on that note.
Was I an angel?
You still are an angel.
Aww, that's so cute.
Yeah. So I'm on that note, I just want to say how really, really grateful I am to be able to be doing this podcast and how grateful I am, Jo, to have you, and how grateful I am for all these unbelievable people that God has blessed me with, that He's allowed to cross my path. And to all of you out there, there's so many of you listening to this podcast. You know what I'm saying? I named a few people at the time, but I could go on and on and on. And I hope some of you will feature on this podcast soon. But I want to at this point say a huge thank you. I feel very, very blessed and very, very grateful.
I'll say thank you too, because without everyone that helped you out, you wouldn't be the same person you are today. That's my amazing mom.
No, I wouldn't. And I would definitely have had less hair. I would have pulled most of it out.
And it would be more gray.
No, that you can dye, but there would be, it would be gray and there'd be less of it.
Oh, and on that note, it's been fun. I really like this story. I'm glad you got to tell it.
Thanks, guys. Yes, it's a little bit more of a serious story, but I think worthwhile telling.
Yeah, I always love hearing it. I have heard you tell it to a few different people here and there, and I love it every single time. And on that note, you can join us next week again for our next episode. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and now on Instagram as well. We've just created that account. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.